Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not Kemi Badenoch, obviously. I'm Liam Halligan. I'm from GB News. I'm also a long-standing columnist in the Sunday Telegraph, and I've been asked by Kemi to host a Q&A session with her so you can get to know her a little bit better. We've only got 20 minutes. I think I can see the clock somewhere. So let's kick off. Kemi, I think the first time you took the stage at the Conservative Party conference was in 2017. You were the warm-up act for the Prime Minister, no less, Theresa May, in Manchester. Certain things happened in that speech, like letters falling off the set and so on, which meant perhaps you didn't get the headlines you deserved. But you'd already made a mark in politics. You came into the House in 2017. You'd given your maiden speech on Brexit. It was a very fast elevation to centre stage of the Conservative Party. But you'd been in politics for quite a long time, hadn't you? I think you first stood against Tessa Jowell in 2010.
Yes. Sorry, what's the question?
So the question... So I guess the question was, how did it feel after quite a long time to stand up and address conference on that day?
Absolutely terrifying. It's wonderful because I tell people the Conservative Party is my family. And even in that speech I talked about how I married my deputy chairman. But giving speeches is terrifying, which is why I'm doing an in conversation this evening, because despite the fact that people seem to like it when I say stuff, I worry about the things that can go wrong, and I find having a conversation an easier way of explaining some of the things that are important about Conservative philosophy than just talking in a speech.
The Conservative Party have known about you and your talents for a long time, despite the relatively short time you've been in Parliament, and I think the whole country really got to know you during the Conservative leadership contest. When you saw that there was going to be a leadership contest, how long did it take you, Kemi, to decide to stand?
About 24 hours, and it's very hard to describe the mindset that I was in at the time. I had resigned after agonizing over resigning. I didn't want to resign, and I resigned with my friends, who are both sort of friends personally as well as philosophically. And there were so many things which I felt I had not been able to say because I'd been on payroll for a very long time. I'd been a minister, party vice chairman, and I thought, now I'm the backbencher. Now I can say exactly what I think, but what will make people listen, and what is it that I think our party needs to do. And quite a few people also encouraged me to stand, so it wasn't just a fit of megalomania. I did have a lot of people encouraging me. But it was difficult because when you're standing to be leader of a party, and in this case to be Prime Minister of a country, it's a very serious decision. There's going to be a huge impact on your family. And you can't also help feeling overwhelmed by imposter syndrome. So on the one hand, someone who is fairly ideological like me, I know what I think, and things have to be done in a certain way. This absolutely has to be done. And then you think, oh my God, being Prime Minister of a country, imposter syndrome sort of overwhelms you. So you're going through quite a lot of turmoil of emotions. But I'm really glad I stood in the contest. I think that I said a lot of the things that the party wanted to hear, but and I don't think I would have been a Secretary of State without it. It was nice to be able to show Liz, now the Prime Minister, that I could do more than what I had been doing, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity that she's given me.
And I have to say, to quote Bruce Forsyth, ladies and gentlemen, didn't she do well? Tell us a little bit about your early life. You were born in the UK, but then you very quickly went back to your family in Nigeria. It wasn't just a passing thing. You spent your childhood in Nigeria. You had a properly African childhood. How did that impact your political philosophy, your ideology? How did that impact your drive to get to the top of British politics?
Significantly. Almost everything that I think is formed from having grown up in a developing country. And I mean, my political philosophy is probably Roger Scruton plus Thomas Sowell, for those of you who know who those authors are. I'm a child of both of those two men. That's what I think about the world. And growing up in Nigeria meant that I had experiences that can't be taken away by poor arguments. So I was born into a relatively wealthy family, but we lost all our money. So people are often confused when I talk about growing up in poverty, but I experienced both. Which means I'm terrified of inflation, because inflation wiped away everything that my...
And you understand financial insecurity.
Exactly.
In a way a lot of people in our political class and our media class don't.
Precisely. So it's informed a lot of my economic views, my views on authoritarianism. I grew up under a military government, so loving freedom and being free to be able to do things and think for yourself is really, really important. I mean, when I was at school, there was one particular military government where if teachers were late, they got flogged on the streets before they got to the school, not just the students. It was such a contrast to moving to a place where freedom is really important, but also even things like free trade and learning that you can't buck the market, you know, the iron laws of supply and demand. You would get, you know, export controls and capital controls, and all of a sudden the currency would go haywire. So a lot of very strong views on economics, but also even, and I know that it's been covered a bit, some of the comments I've made in earlier panels about immigration. My views on immigration were formed by my father, who was a GP, not being able to hire medical staff because all of them had come here or gone to the US. And we need to be very careful about what we're doing to other countries in the way that we think about migration. Migration is... I don't think we should talk about immigration as if people are economic units. They are more than that. And when people come to a country, there is a contract that's being made about joining an existing society, and we need to think about it more broadly rather than people come here to work and make us wealthier or look after our elderly. There's something more that's going on, and I'm hoping that we can have a much better conversation about immigration than the one we've been having in this country. And I speak as a first-generation immigrant, so I know that there are a lot of things that's probably easier for me to say than others, and I think that I should use my voice to have a civilized conversation about what kind of country we want to be.
And just briefly, I've been to Nigeria several times, West Africa in general. Nigeria is an incredibly dynamic, entrepreneurial place. It's full of very, very, very talented people, but it's also a place which, with all respect, and I say this with a lot of respect for Nigeria and West Africa in general, it needs leadership. And I guess that's another lesson that you learned from living in Nigeria.
Yes, good leadership, a respect for institutions, a respect for the rule of law, all of the things that make the United Kingdom great. And we know that our country is great because every day we see, you know, thousands of people trying to get here. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so frustrated with the narrative about how terrible the UK is and how everything we do is wrong. And it's quite striking to hear people talk about their own country in this way. Many people who you would consider part of the establishment, thank you, and elites talking down their country because it has an impact. It even has an impact on things like my new role in trade. If you are telling the rest of the world that your country is, you know, is terrible and racist, what do you think happens when your trade secretary goes to a developing country to ask for things? It means that they suddenly will view you with suspicion. There's so many knock-on effects of this type of talk that people don't realize. It is very indulgent, and it frustrates me because when I try and talk about these things, I end up being characterized as a culture warrior. These things are not trivial. They are very, very serious, and we need to get a little bit more serious about them. Our economic problems and our cultural problems, as we think, they are quite interlinked, and separating the two isn't necessarily helpful in terms of finding a way forward.
Now, as I've got to know you over recent years, I've come to understand that you really are a politician with a hinterland. You're a trained engineer. You really know your way around coding and computers and so on. You work very closely in terms of your politics with Hamish Badenoch, who himself stood as a Conservative councillor, was a Conservative councillor in Merton in South London. You've got 3 lovely young children. politics is really, really important to you, and indeed to Hamish, but it's not everything, is it? You do have a life outside of politics.
Not anymore. It's just my family and work, really. Yeah.
But you did do things before you came into Parliament. How important is that you had a career in your own right? You weren't just you didn't just go from a PPE course to become a SPAD and then into politics.
No, I actually think a lot of the things I did just before and during university helped shape me. I mean, anyone who watched the leadership hustings would have heard me talk about McDonald's 1,000 times. Yeah, that was my first job, and it had a profound
Were you any good?
impact. No, actually, I wasn't, because I never got the stars.
Oh, you didn't get the stars?
No, so it was not my. It was not where my core skill set lay.
Was it the fries station you didn't perform, or the shakes?
I was very bad in the kitchen, but I was okay with the money.
He's a great cook.
Yeah, he is. And so jobs like that, having grown up, as I said, in a family that was wealthy and didn't have to do things like that, that really shaped me. And I had to do lots of temp jobs. I had an apprenticeship before I went to university. So all of those things influenced me. And then after my degree, going into software consulting and working in banks, it just sort of gave me a little bit of a broader sort of job history before politics.
But you made your way into politics, onto the candidates list. Many people here and Conservatives across the country will be very grateful for that. I think somebody called Francis Maude played a role.
Yes, so Francis Maude, actually, it was my trade minister. I don't know if I thought you were going to ask me questions about trade, Liam.
We're coming to it.
Okay, fine. So actually, I met a man at a party, a Christmas party for the Young Conservatives, whose name's Conor Burns, and he said, "I think you're amazing, you should meet the party chairman," who was Francis Maude. And Francis Maude said, "Oh, you should really think about becoming an MP." And it's really funny because Conor Burns is, of course, now my junior minister in Department for International Trade.
We won't make that mistake again.
It's fantastic having him working with me, because I actually wouldn't be here if we hadn't had that conversation. I went into that room, I didn't know anybody. And it's one of the examples of how our party is so welcoming to so many people. And just having somebody say, "Hello, who are you?" and have a conversation. And then 17 years later, here I am.
You do now have a big, hefty role in Cabinet, the trade portfolio. I think you were in the States last week,
yes.
Trying to drum up business for the UK, banging the drum, as you say. Tell us about what you want to try and achieve during your time as Trade Secretary, Kemi.
So the Prime Minister has given me a mandate. You all know that we have a growth plan, and the Department for International Trade is integral to that plan, and I'm going to do everything to help her deliver on her agenda. I fully support the Prime Minister 100%. I think that we do. I do. I think. I think we do need to make sure that the Conservative message around the economy is one that doesn't get lost in a lot of the media storms that we see. So yes, trade is going to be very important. I am trying to shift the Overton window of trade as we see it beyond trade deals. So everyone thinks the Department of International Trade does trade deals. So trade deals are great, but they're not the only thing. Trade deals are like the motorway. It's fantastic, you get them built, but if the cars aren't going back and forth, then you might as well not have built them. Yeah. And the going back and forth is exports and investment. We have a new investment minister, Dominic Johnson, who I'm delighted to hear has joined the team with James Duddridge and Conor Burns. And I think we're going to be a fantastic team. But we're going to be working not just on signing deals, but making sure that people are actually using them, making sure that our businesses are able to get their goods out there, that people want to invest in the UK. And what I learned in the US is that people really love our country. They think that this is a safe place for them to invest their money. The US is the single biggest investor in the UK without a trade deal, 459 billion.
And 17% of our trade.
Absolutely. 1.5 million Brits work go to an American company every day. So Trade deals, yes, they are essential, but actually making sure that we stop people from creating new regulations outside the trade deal that will harm our businesses requires quite a lot of day-to-day dialogue. It's not exciting. A lot of it's very technical, dealing with the WTO, but it makes a difference to everyday people. It helps businesses grow, and it means that we continue to develop our reputation in the world. And so that's what I'm going to be doing as Trade Secretary.
Even before Brexit, of course, the majority of our trade was outside of the EU. We were unique in the EU in that sense, which is one reason why the customs union, in the eyes of many, I know you, wasn't suitable for the UK. But of course, Europe remains, doesn't it, a major trading partner. So I guess you'll be spending quite a lot of your time talking to EU members as well.
Yes, that's right. And just because we're not within the single market doesn't mean that there aren't other things that we can do. So for instance, I know that we have an investment partnership that we're working with Norway on, for example. There are loads of individual partnerships that we can have. And even though the US is not doing any trade deals at the moment, we are able to have a memorandum of understanding with states. So we can do mini trade deals with the 50 states of the US. And one of the things that I'm more worried about is that the entire world is becoming more protectionist. Whether it's the US focusing on Buy America or other countries subsidizing their markets, you look at what China is doing. We need a level playing field in order to have good free trade. And trade is not just, the primary purpose of trade in my view is as a tool for prosperity, but it's not just for prosperity. It's also a tool for security. When you look at food security or even energy security, our trade policy is going to have an impact on how we live our lives far into the future. What are the critical minerals that we need to get to ensure that we can build electric vehicles, for example? Are we going to get locked out of those regions because China and Russia got there first? We mustn't allow anything like that to happen, and it's going to require a very front-footed trade team and a trade policy from the UK that is global and outward-looking, but making sure that we still stay in a close relationship with our existing allies.
Now, you're a member for Saffron Walden, of course, beautiful North Essex market town, distinguished...
Liam is a constituent, which is why, that's why I asked him to do this.
Former members for Saffron Walden, of course, have included Deputy Common Speaker Alan Hazelhurst and indeed nobody less than R.A. Butler,
That's right.
who is, whose grave is next to the beautiful Saffron Walden St Mary's Church. Just give us a little bit of your sense of how important education has been to you in getting you where you are now and your passion for education.
It's been absolutely vital. It's a cliche to say so. I would not be here without the very good education which I had supported, of course, by my parents and their philosophy that it was the most important thing. And when you see just how many people around the world struggle to get a good education, you don't take it for granted here, but it's also the reason why I'm of the view that we need to have rigorous standards across the board in all our schools, and also give teachers the tools that they need to make sure that we can educate our children so they're the brightest and the best.
Last couple of questions, Kemi. The penultimate question is this. Identity politics, it is something that you speak out on quite often, though I know very strongly you don't want to be identified with that. Your talents and interests go far, far broader. But how have we got to this point? How have we got to the point where there's contention over definitions of what a woman is and so on?
I think a lot of things have happened at the same time, but what I would say is that many of the people, not all of them, but many of the people who have the views that are at odds with the way we Conservatives see the world, is that they are trying to fill a void. And I remember being at an event where I had spoken and I met these very young ladies who people would call woke. It's not a word that I actually use. I think it trivializes what is going on. So if you see me being quoted as using the word woke, know that I probably didn't.
Fake news.
Yeah, except for now when I just used it. But But we had a long conversation, and after the argument, I could tell that they weren't really solid in what they were thinking. And I asked them, well, why do you think this? And one of them said, because I want to feel like I'm a part of something important. And we mustn't forget that at the heart of this is a lot of people are trying to find their way around the world, whether it's replacing religion or family or a sense of belonging. And that's something which, as Conservatives, we completely understand. The problem is that on top of this, there is an activist class of people, and we know who they are. We see them outside chanting at protests, and they're at every protest with the Socialist Worker Party banner, and they exploit, actually, the issues that a lot of people have to attack what I would call our conservative and liberal values. It's not only conservatives who are under attack. In fact, if you look at many of the issues the gender-critical women have faced, it's mainly people on the left. So I think that there's something missing. But the reason why it's got to this stage is because we have lost the art of political argument ourselves. So I don't think that as conservatives we should point fingers all the time. Sometimes we need to look inwards and look at what we are doing wrong. And one of those things is actually not making the argument enough, sometimes conceding where we shouldn't concede, or worried that people might think that we're bigots or one phobe or the other and not say the right thing. It's absolutely important to be true to our convictions and make the argument in as civilized a manner as possible, and also actually force people to say what they mean. Thank you. We need to be more precise in our language as well. A lot of the difficulty. More courageous, more precise. Get people to say what they mean. Quite often we're having two totally different conversations. Leave Twitter. It's just a bad place. I call it the devil's message board, but it feeds a lot of this. And also, and I do consider myself on the liberal part of the conservative wing, but I think sometimes people don't understand our views of liberalism and liberty, and they think that it's the freedom to do bad things. And we must make sure that when we're talking about freedom, it's not the freedom to do bad things. It's the freedom to live your life as you choose while respecting the dignity of others, and always being cognizant of those who have a different point of view. And I think if we do that, then we'll get to a better place.
Final question, Secretary of State, because we are almost out of time. I know from conversations with you and indeed with the Prime Minister and Chancellor over many years that you share with those two a lot of the same values about the economy, about how we get growth going, the importance of growing the cake rather than arguing always about an existing cake. I think it's fair to say recent days have shown the difficulties of getting that message across sometimes. So how can you, the whole cabinet, the whole party, when activists go out knocking on doors and so on, how can they bring the country with them when in terms of putting forward this growth plan and making it stick?
Well, first of all, as a party, we need to get behind the Prime Minister, because if we don't do that, then none of that we need unity, and we need to be able to have dissent in a grown-up fashion. I think that whenever people have problems with policy, I think there's a way of communicating it and not necessarily rushing to the first TV studio to let everybody know how angry you are. And some of the people who've done this are my friends, but it's not helpful for the whole party, so the party needs to come together. But we also need to remember who our real opponents are, and that's the Labour Party. And we are not here to fight ourselves. So if we make sure that we make our arguments very clearly, and the Prime Minister did say yesterday that we didn't lay the groundwork for it. So we need to communicate better, and that's something that I take as a personal responsibility, explaining what our party's policies are and doing so in a way that resonates with the general public. But the fact is that we have not been growing in this country. We have a high GDP, but we have a low GDP per capita. America's is 17% more than ours, for example. So we do need to do something about growth. And one of the things that worries me is that there's so many people out there who are willing us to fail that we can end up just losing the argument and losing the country if we aren't sort of more courageous about explaining why what we're doing is right. It's also, yes, explanation is key, but it's also, it is morally right to go for growth, because if people don't have any growth, they won't have any homes, they won't become capitalists, they won't become homeowners. We need to be able to create something for our future, and that's why growth is important. It is not an end in itself, it's a means to a better quality of life for everybody, and that's what we're fighting for.
Well, Kemi Badenoch, MP for Saffron Walden. Didn't I mention Saffron Walden? Secretary of State for Trade. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. Thanks to you for asking me. Thanks to GB News for giving me time off in a very busy day. Ladies and gentlemen, Kemi Badenoch.